Hello, welcome. My name is Ben. I'm owner of Our Bookshop in Tring. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you to the audience who are there, and most importantly, thank you to Aisling Fowler for joining us from sunny LA. It is sunny, isn't it?
The sun is coming up, but yes, I think and hope it will be sunny today.
So the time it's 2 o'clock here at the moment, and it's 7 o'clock in the morning where you are. So you've had to get up. You don't look like someone who's had to get up unearthly early. You're looking magnificent, dare I say it.
That's very kind of you. I did put some makeup on before this. I'm not going to lie. Lots of under eye concealer.
Oh, brilliant, brilliant. And we are here. And it's a bit of a big moment for Ashley because this was always going to be a three series, wasn't it? 3 book series.
Yes.
And today her third in the series Fireborn has come out. And I have to tell you, I've got to admit, firstly, I'm coming clean. I haven't read the third one. I've read the first two, but so I'm anything you say is going to be a revelation to me. So I'm really excited about this, apart from anything else.
No spoilers then. I will be reading from the third book, but I've tried to choose readings that don't give too much away about what happens in earlier books in the series. So for anyone out there listening who's like, oh no, she's going to ruin the whole series before I've even begun, don't worry, there will be no
There's
spoilers.
pretty much the
Apart
very
from one
well.
tiny unavoidable one, but we'll come to that later. It's
Fantastic.
not a big one
So
though.
you've got a rather lovely presentation to give. So I think what we'll do is I'll disappear and allow you to crack on with that, and then
Mhm.
at the end I'll come back and we'll have a little Q&A, questions that come to mind and any questions from the audience. So
Fantastic.
without further ado, let me hand over to you.
Thank you, Ben. So I'm just going to share my screen. So anyone with us, just bear with me for one moment. And hopefully you will be able to now see my screen, which should have a presentation of that says Fireball on it with a picture of the 3 books. So thank you so much for joining me today. As Ben said, this is a really special day for me because it is the publication of book 3, which is the final book in the Fireborn series. And it feels like a real kind of landmark moment that the whole series is out there now, available for you to read. So what I would love to do with this session is tell you a bit about the series. I can't see you in your classrooms normally at this point if I'm there in person. I ask who likes reading and if anyone's read Fireborn before and if anyone likes their own stories. But because I can't see you, I'm going to assume that the average thing is true, which is that some of you may have read the series and some of you won't have. So I'm going to start by introducing the story so we're all up to speed. And then I'm going to read 3 short sections, one from each of the books. But I've chosen these readings so that there won't be any spoilers. So don't worry, the books aren't going to be ruined for you if you haven't read them yet. And after each of these short readings, there's going to be just a little creative exercise. So I'm hoping that you might have pencil and paper, something to hand that you can jot some ideas down on. If you don't have that, now would be a great moment to grab it if you can. And if you really don't have access to it, then don't worry. These creative exercises, you can also just do them with a partner. So if you have someone sitting next to you, you can kind of talk about your ideas in pairs or small groups. So whatever works best for you in the setting that you're in will be fine. And I'm also going to, alongside these creative exercises, talk a little bit about some of the inspirations behind the series. And we're hopefully going to have time for some questions at the end if there's anything that you really want to ask me. So hopefully that sounds good. We're going to come in at about 40 minutes. So let's begin. So what is Fireborn about? Well, the story follows our main character, who is called 12, and you should be able to see her, hopefully, on the top left of the screen here. She is the girl riding the giant stone dog. Now, 12 is a huntling, but what does that mean? Well, it means that she lives and trains at the hunting lodge, which you can also see on screen, and she's learning how to fight monsters because her world is full of these dark, quite frightening, really, creatures who make life for the people in 12's world quite difficult. So 12 is training to become a protector of her people. Now, quite early on in the story, the hunting lodge is attacked. For the first time ever, these monsters, these dark creatures, manage to break inside the lodge walls. And the attack is repelled, But when the dust settles, it becomes clear that something awful has happened. A little girl has been taken, and she's no longer in the hunting lodge. Now, our main character, 12, is really horrified by this, but she becomes even more horrified when she realizes that the hunters, who are the adults in charge of the hunting lodge, and really they're the adults in charge of keeping the whole world safe from these monsters, they don't seem to be doing anything about it. And 12 thinks to herself, well, if they're not going to do anything, then I will. So she packs a bag of supplies. She takes her pet squirrel, Widge, who you can also see on screen here, and she sets out into the wilderness, determined to rescue this girl and bring her safely home. But what I haven't told you is that the hunting lodge is located in quite a dangerous part of 12's world. In fact, a very dangerous part of her world. It's called the Fang Mountains, and it's where a lot of these monsters live. That's actually why the hunting lodge is located there. So this is really not an easy task that she set herself at all. And she thinks that she's going to be doing it by herself, just her and her squirrel Widge. But that turns out to be not quite the case. And along the way, she meets the lodge's stone guardian, this giant stone dog, just called Dog, and you can see him on screen too. And she meets two fellow huntlings, two boys called 5 and 6. And she's particularly displeased to see all of these other characters because 12 is a little bit of a loner. She doesn't really trust other people very easily, and really she prefers to do things by herself. So really what we have here is quite a mismatched group of companions. And Fireborn really is the story of this epic quest that they undertake together to try and rescue this girl. But it's also the story of the monsters that they meet and the many, many secrets that they are keeping from each other. And I have to say, there's a lot of monsters and there's a lot of secrets. So that's my little spiel about the first book in the Fireborn series, kind of Fireborn in a nutshell. And what I would love to do now is jump straight into the books. I'm going to skip the next slide because I'm having an issue with my sound, unfortunately. So we're going to go straight to the reading. So I'm going to read you a short section from quite early on in the book. And there's just a couple of things that you need to know to understand what's going on. So our main character, 12, and this huntling boy called 5, who she doesn't get on with very well, they are locked in the dungeons in the hunting lodge. Now, in the hunting lodge, a night in the dungeons is the most severe form of punishment that you can be given. I'm not going to tell you what the pair have done to end up down there. You'll have to read the books to find out. But they are locked underground and they have been there all night. It's nearly dawn and they're hearing these sounds from above. They're fairly sure the hunting lodge is under attack. Now, 12 has just managed to break herself out of her cell, and she's grudgingly helped 5 out of his cell too. And the two of them are having a conversation over what should happen next. 12 grabbed 5's arm and tugged him forward, but he pulled back with a jerk, his familiar supercilious expression returning. Warn everyone, that's what the night watch is for. As if on cue, the deep, dolorous boom of the alarm bell sounded. It shivered through the earth walls straight into 12's heart. The attack had begun. 5 shrank from the sound, and 12 was unpleasantly reminded of herself only moments before. But if the lodge was under attack, then she was determined to do her bit in defending it. Fine, she snapped, adrenaline making her hand shake. You stay here, but I'm going to help. Without waiting for his response, she scrambled over the clods of earth and jogged to the stairs, cursing as her candle flame flickered, nearly going out. Widge's claws dug through her furs as sounds of fighting crashed down from above, hurrying her feet. Growls and howls, screamed orders, the clash of metal and the shrieks of the injured all mingled into a terrifying cacophony of battle sound. At the top of the spiral staircase, the dungeon door had been smashed off its hinges. The scene beyond it froze 12 to the spot. In the pale light of dawn, A nightmare of violence and destruction spread before her. The candle slipped from her fingers, and Widge chittered his shock. 4 fully grown ogres roared in the centre of the training ground, spittle flying from their mouths. 20 feet tall and armed with morning stars, they swung furiously at the hunters swarming around their legs. Spears and arrows rained down from the night watch on the sky bridges, but they had little effect on the ogres' tough hides. 12 hovered in the broken doorway, axes in hand, gathering her courage. Better get off, Widge, she whispered. This fight is for real. No place for a squirrel. Widge gave her a disparaging look while baring his teeth. She couldn't help but snort a nervous laugh. I'm not sure your teeth will be much good against an ogre, but it's up to you. You'd better get on my back instead, though. The squirrel obliged. 12 took a deep breath and sprinted out into the chaos. So, we leave our main character 12 at a little bit of a perilous moment there as she's sprinting out to face these ogres. And I wonder what you think of her now that we've met her. What do you think of 12 as a character? Are there any words that kind of jump into your head to describe her? For me, the first word that always comes to me is brave. When I was writing 12, I really wanted to write a truly brave character. But maybe you also think she's a little bit impulsive because she really does just race out into the danger without a lot of thought or planning beforehand. Maybe you even think that she's a little bit foolish because of that. There might be a lot of other words that pop into your head to describe her. What I would love to do now is take your imaginations and put them to good use. So I said at the beginning of the session that there was going to be a little creative activity after each one of the readings. And this first activity is all around this idea of character. So what makes a good character? What makes a really memorable character? And what I would like you guys to do is to invent your own huntling. So I want you to give your huntling a number name. I want you to give them an animal companion. It can be any animal, real or imagined. And then I want you to think about what type of personality they might be. So are they going to be someone a bit like 12, someone brave and impulsive, someone who's really resourceful? Or are they going to be a bit of a different character, perhaps someone a bit more cautious, someone who might like to make a plan before they rush out into action? Your own imagination is the limit here. There's no right or wrong. Anything goes. Hopefully you have a pencil and paper and you can either make notes or draw a picture. And like I said before, if you don't have access to a pencil and paper, maybe just a little conversation with the people around you about this to share ideas. I'm going to give you 2 minutes for this exercise. I'm going to set a timer at my end, and I'll give you a heads up when it's 2 minutes and we'll go back to the session. So 2 minutes to create your huntling character. I hope you enjoy it. So that was about 2 minutes. Normally at this point, I ask if anyone would like to just share their Huntling characters. Obviously, we can't do this today, but I am sure that there's some incredible characters that have come to life in your classrooms. And if you do want to send me any of them, send me pictures of your work, then please do. I would love to see them. What we're going to do now is move on, and I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the inspirations behind Fireborn. So I've written this series of books, but where did I get my ideas from? Now, I think that I'm really lucky because I remember the exact moment that the first spark of the story came to me. And it was actually while I was watching my husband play a video game. Um, Now, the game that I was watching was called Horizon Zero Dawn. And the reason that I loved it was because of the main character, Aloy, who was a really fantastic heroine, kind of an action heroine, to be honest, but someone who was really brave and resourceful, resilient. She was fiercely intelligent and really someone who just kind of went out there and got things done. And like I said, she was the real reason that I loved watching this video game so much. But I think that the reason that I liked Aloy so much was that she reminded me of some other characters that I'd loved when I was a girl. So these are both actually characters from television shows, and I'm just going to introduce them briefly and tell you a little bit about them. They're quite old television shows now, so I'm not expecting you to have heard of them before. The first TV series was called Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and the clue is conveniently kind of in the name. The main character was called Buffy, and she was a vampire slayer. She lived in a town called Sunnydale, which was unusual for being located on a hellmouth. And that meant it was always being attacked by vampires and demons and all sorts of nasty creatures. And as a vampire slayer, Buffy's role was to be the one who went out and faced these things down. So she really was a protector of her friends and her family and of her whole community. And she was really, really good at what she did. And she faced down all these dark creatures, and she also had this incredible sense of humor. And the television show was quite funny. So I was a huge fan of Buffy when I was maybe 14, 15, 16 years old. So probably just a bit older than you guys listening now. And before Buffy, there was another television show. Again, very conveniently, the clue is kind of in the name. Xena Warrior Princess was its name, and the main character was Xena, and she was a warrior princess. She was a character very much cut from the same cloth as Aloy and Buffy, someone who was kind of fierce and resourceful, a real action heroine and protector of the people around her. So cut back to me sitting on the sofa watching this video game and watching Aloy. And I was thinking about these characters. I was thinking about Buffy and Xena and Aloy. And I remember this thought popping into my head. Why aren't you writing characters like these? Characters like the ones that you really loved when you were young. And that was the moment that my main character 12 popped into my head. She was the very first spark of the story to come to me. And I wouldn't say that I knew everything about her straight away, but she did arrive in my head holding a pair of axes. And I knew almost immediately that she needed those axes to fight the monsters in her world. So the monsters arrived hot on her heels. Now, this is going to sound a little bit strange because obviously 12 is a made-up character, but I always say, and it's true, that I discovered everything else about 12's world from 12 herself. So she was the first seed of the story, and everything else kind of grew outwards from her. And I discovered everything in her world by asking her questions. And my very first question to her was, why are you holding those axes? And that's how I found out about the monsters. And then by asking her other questions, I found out about the clans and the hunting lodge and the different areas in her world, and even about the other characters in her world. So in a funny way, 12 is kind of the inspiration for the world that she lives in that everything kind of grew out of her. And these three characters on screen, Aloy, Buffy, and Xena, are the inspirations for 12. Now, I don't know if there's anyone listening who enjoys writing their own stories, but if there are any of you out there, there's something a little bit interesting here, I think, in these inspirations, which is that I have written a series of books, but the inspirations that I've just talked to you about, they're not from books, are they? They are from a video game and 2 television shows. And I think there's something kind of interesting here, which is worth pointing out, which is that you never know what is going to give you a really great idea if you're a writer. So you might want to write a book, but you might be taking your inspirations from video games and television shows, or from movies, graphic novels, comics, or even maybe things that are a little bit more abstract than that. Things that you see in a museum maybe, or an art gallery, or even a conversation that you overhear. You never know what is going to give you a really good idea for a story. So any aspiring writers out there, my kind of tip maybe for you is to keep your eyes and ears open, because you never know, your next great story idea might be just around the corner. So I hope that's a little bit inspiring for some of you. Now, what I would love to do now is jump straight back into the book. But this reading is going to be a little bit different from the first reading, and that this is going to be from the second book in the Fireborn series. I've chosen a reading very early in the story, so there won't be too many spoilers about what happens in book 1. But there is one thing that I need to tell you, which is fairly important. In the first book, our main character is called 12. In the second book of the series, we have the same main character, but her name is now Phoenix, because at the end of the first book, she chooses herself a hunter name, and the name she chooses herself is Phoenix. But she is the same character. The scene that I'm going to read to you from, like I said, is very early in the second book. Phoenix and her group of companions are in a mountain clan village called Ledge, and they're hunting for a dark creature called an edgeworm. They've climbed up to the very top of this incredibly high cliff. This cliff is so high that when they look over the edge, there's an ocean of cloud beneath them. That's how high they are. For reasons that I won't go into, there's a wooden platform that juts over the edge of this cliff, and the group of friends think that this is where the edgeworm has taken up residence, and they are hunting for it. Next to Phoenix, 5 whistled softly. Not that comforting to think there's just these planks between us and the ground, he said. How high did Chief Saw say we were up here? Let's not think about that, 6 said from Phoenix's other side, taking a very cautious step forward. The end of the platform was about 10 feet away. Phoenix scanned the boards for any alteration in colour or texture. 5 was using his sword to prod the wood every few inches ahead of him. 6 was doing the same with an arrow. Nothing yet, 5 whispered, pressing the tip of his sword into another board. There was no hint of humour about him now. Every line of his face was tense and watchful. 8 feet from the edge. Phoenix advanced cautiously, her vision filled with a seamless red. On her shoulder, Widge was stiff and still, his eyes fixed on the painted wood too. 7 feet. 6's arrow dug into the grain of wood with barely a sound. 6 feet. Phoenix tried to stop her eyes from flicking forward to the drop, to the endless blue that awaited them if they made a mistake. 5 feet. A prickle of sweat stood out on 5's forehead. We must be very close, he whispered, stretching out his blade again. There! With sudden certainty, Phoenix saw a tiny change in the pattern of the wood, an alteration so slight you'd never notice it unless you were looking hard. Her hand shot out and grabbed 5's wrist, just before the tip of his blade touched down. Here? 6 whispered. Yes, I see it. As one, they took a step back. The edge of the platform had appeared to be about 5 feet away. Really, it was no more than an inch ahead of them. One more step, and they would have plummeted to their deaths. The silence around them was absolute. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Then, in an explosion of movement, 5 sprang forward. His sword sank deeply into the creature at their feet, and he leaped away again as a furious shriek rent the silence. Side by side, 5, 6, and Phoenix moved further back as a mind-bending flood of change spread from the wound Five had inflicted. The red planks rippled, bucking and twisting as their colour and texture morphed. A moment later, a rough, scaly creature was visible in front of them. Its yellow eyes regarded them balefully as its low, leggy shape tensed, ready to attack. So we leave our group of companions there at another kind of dangerous moment for them. They've just found the edgeworm. They're in quite a perilous location, very high up at the end of this platform, and the creature is not happy about Five having just stabbed it. So you have to read the book to find out what happens next. Can you guess what the next creative exercise is going to be based on that reading? I am going to ask you all to invent your own monster or your own magical creature. So we just met the edgeworm in that reading, but there are many, many different monsters and dark creatures throughout the Fireborn series. And I have to say that inventing them was one of my favourite parts of the writing process. I really, really enjoyed it, and I hope that you will as well. So what do I want you to do? I would like you to think about what your monster, and I should say, actually, it doesn't have to be a monster. It could also be a friendly magical creature if you prefer. But I'd like you, whichever you decide on, I'd like you to think about what it's going to be called. What does it look like? Where does it live? What does it eat? And then I'd like you to give it some rankings. So on screen, you can see a table with some monstrous rankings and some friendly rankings. So in Phoenix's world, there's a book called A Magical Bestiary, and it ranks all of the dangerous creatures in her world according to these three categories: danger, aggression, and difficulty to disable. So I would like you to give your monstrous creature some rankings as well. And if you want to make a friendly magical creature, you could use different rankings. And of course, this is your creative exercise. Your own imagination is the limit here. So if you want to give it different rankings, then go wild. And if you want to draw a picture, then that also is wonderful. I'm going to give you 3 minutes for this. And as before, I'm going to set a timer at this end and let you know when the time's up. But I hope you enjoy creating your own monster. So that's 3 minutes, which I know isn't very long, but I want to make sure we have enough time for if anyone has questions at the end. Now, I know without a doubt that there are some fantastic monsters and magical creatures that have come to life in your classrooms, because there always are. If I was there in person, I would love to hear them. But as I said, I have no doubt that there are some amazing ones there. What I would like to do now is move on to the third and final reading in this session. This one is a bit of a special one because it is from the third book in the Fireborn series, which only came out today, and this is the first time ever that I've got to read from this book. So I am very excited about this. I've chosen a reading quite early on in the story. So again, there's no spoilers about what happens earlier in the series. All you need to know to understand what's going on is that the group of companions are about to enter a location that they've never been in before. They're about to enter the caves. They're going underground. But the entrance to the caves is hidden. They have met the cave clan chief, who is called Cast, and he's leading them through the secret entrance, which is actually behind a waterfall. So they've crossed stepping stones to the face of the waterfall, and the scene that I'm reading to you from is, we'll find out what happens next. All ready? Cast said. Now would be an ideal time for waterproof. He pulled a fine oilskin from his pocket, shook it out, and placed it daintily over his head before vanishing into the waterfall itself. He really could have mentioned the waterproof thing in his letter, Five said sourly, eyeing the rushing water. With a sigh, Phoenix pulled her bearskin tight around her neck after encouraging Widge beneath it, then braced herself for the painful punch of water as she followed Cast. It never came. Instead of the wallop she'd expected, there was only an ice-cold trickle that flowed in a chilling sheet over her crown and face. Then suddenly, even that was gone. Phoenix could only stare, stunned at the sight before her. The others cried out in surprise as they followed her. There was just enough light to see that the path continued, untouched by the waterfall. Above them was an enormous spur of rock, parting the water into two walls of liquid on either side of them. They formed a passage that cut directly through the falls. The friends were inside the waterfall. In the distance, Cast waved them on. Phoenix thought his mouth moved, but it was impossible to hear anything over Netherfoss's roar. The way grew darker and more treacherous as the group proceeded, and Phoenix pulled the moonstone from her pocket, its blue-white brilliance lighting up the cascading water and casting rainbows through the mist. Widge poked his head out of her collar to look around. It's beautiful, isn't it? His bright-eyed gaze agreed with her. Abruptly, the path met the solid rock behind the falls, its surface slick with moisture and green with moss. A narrow shelf edged beneath the tumbling falls before vanishing into a dark cleft. An entrance to the caves. A shiver ran through Phoenix. She knew better than to dwell on the chilling tales she'd been told about the caves as a child, but when the darkness plucked at the moonstone light, her heart raced in spite of itself. She reminded herself sternly that the caves held answers about the Master and that Seven was somewhere inside. She took a deep breath and stepped off the ledge, away from the pounding water and into the narrow space behind the rock. So that was from book 3 at the very start of Phoenix's adventure there. And as the group just enter a new location, a new setting for the story. And that is what the third and final creative exercise is about. This idea of setting. So what makes a good setting in a story and what makes an exciting setting? In the 3 readings, we have seen 12/Phoenix at the hunting lodge. We've seen her in this mountain clan village called Ledge at the top of this extraordinarily high cliff. And we've just left her going underground, entering a cave system through a secret passage behind a waterfall. So what I would like you to do now is to look at your piece of paper in front of you or think about the ideas that you've discussed in small groups. You have a huntling main character, and you have a monster or a magical creature. And I'd like you to think now about where would you like to put these characters that you've invented? What would be your setting for them? It could be a classic fantastical setting, like an enchanted forest or a magical palace. Or it could be something completely different. Maybe you want to put your characters in space. Maybe you want to put them in a submarine at the bottom of the ocean. Maybe you even want to put them in this world, but a different historical time period. Or maybe even just in your house right now. Anything goes, but I'm just going to give you 1 minute to think about a setting for your story. And if you want to draw a quick map, that would be great. I'm just going to set a timer at this end. I know 1 minute's not very long, but I'll see you in 1 minute. So that was about a minute, which I know isn't long, but hopefully you just have a couple of ideas brewing about the setting for your story. We're very close to the end of the session now. I just want to leave you with a final kind of thought and take-home exercise if you've enjoyed this session, and particularly if you've enjoyed kind of creating your own characters and settings. What I would like to say at this point is that every story that you've ever loved, be it a book or a film or a video game, a graphic novel, all stories have started from small seeds, exactly like what you have on your piece of paper in front of you now. And they start like that, and then whoever invented these stories finds ways to grow their ideas bigger. So this exercise that I'm going to give you now is something to help you grow your ideas bigger if you've enjoyed this session. So I'm going to give you a kind of writing prompt, something to get the juices flowing a bit more. I want you to imagine that your huntling is looking for your monster or your magical creature. And I want you to think of a really compelling, important reason why they want to find the monster. So maybe they want to catch the monster, maybe they even want to kill the monster, but why? You've got to think of a really good reason. And then I want you to write the scene where these two characters finally come face to face using the setting that you've already invented. And I want you to think about things like, what does your huntling see? What are they thinking and feeling when they finally see the monster? Even more sensory things like, what are they smelling? What are they hearing? And of course, what's actually going to happen when these two characters finally meet? And you don't have to write from the huntling's point of view. You could write from the monster or magical creature's point of view if you wanted to. I'm sorry that we don't have time for that now, but that could be a take-home exercise or something to do in a future class, maybe. But I really hope that you've enjoyed this session. Thank you so much for having me. And I think we might have a few minutes for questions, possibly.
We have. We've got about 5 minutes. So, and I had some pre-submitted questions which I can go through apart from anything else, unless any questions come through from any of the children watching.
Oh yeah, if
So,
anyone does have a question, just pop it in the chat box.
yeah, just pop it in the
We can
chat
answer.
box. And so let me firstly open up the questions I received. So Freya would love to know what inspired you to write Fireborn and who's your favourite character. So I think you covered off what inspired you watching your other half playing a game. Um,
Yeah, and the
but
television series Buffy and Xena. But in
and
terms
yeah,
of who my favorite character is, ooh, that's a really difficult question, actually. Um, I really enjoyed writing Widge, who's 12 slash Phoenix's pet squirrel, because he's not a speaking character, but he has a huge personality. And finding ways to kind of bring that to life on the page was really enjoyable. But to be honest, this is probably an honest answer, or an obvious answer, I should say. But I think I would have to say the main character 12, or Phoenix, as she's known in the later books, just because as I kind of touched upon, she was the first spark of the story. She brought this whole series to life, and we've just been on this incredible journey together. So the last book in the series published today, but she first popped into my head in 2017. So she's been with me for 7 years. So she has to be my favorite, I think, because she inspired everything that came after. And actually, I'm just
I,
going to stop sharing my screen so that I can see you, Ben.
yeah. That's fine. Let's go to gallery view. So that raises a question. I've had the fortune of interviewing a number of great children's authors um, who've all written about really great children character or child characters or young characters, and the idea of who would play them in a TV show or in a film. It has to be, and it's likely to be played by an unknown actor, I suspect, or an actress. Do you have anyone in mind? Is there anyone you could sort of mention about any of the characters actually?
So I do get asked this occasionally, and I have to admit I am terrible with actors' names and faces.
Me too.
Unless we're talking Nicole Kidman, I'm probably not going to know who you're talking about. But there is for 12, there's one actor called Daphne Keane, who played Lyra in the Northern Lights series. I actually think she's probably a bit old now because in these books 12 is kind of 13 years old, so and Daphne Keane, I don't know how old she is now, but I think she's probably in her 20s, so she might have aged out. But I think you're probably right. If there was going to be someone playing 12, they'd probably be a young, relatively unknown actor. But Daphne Keane, I love for her intensity. Like there's something really kind of vivid about her, and when I see her acting, and it might also be the characters she played. I mean, she played Lyra, who's also a very fierce kind of heroine. And in Logan, I can't remember the name of the character that she played in Logan, but she was the kind of young Wolverine kind of character. So she has played these very fierce, kind of heroic characters, and I'm a fan of hers. So she would be my
Yeah,
pick.
brilliant. And I had a question from Emily here. It was when you were 8, what were your favourite books when you were reading when you were growing up?
Oh, um, so there's a few that I could mention here. And I have to say, most of them are series. I do think that a series has this kind of ability to really kind of bring you into the world and gives you an opportunity to get to know characters over a much longer time period. So those are the ones that kind of stand out in my mind. And I suppose mine are fairly obvious, like Harry Potter was huge when I was young. And I also loved the His Dark Materials Philip Pullman series. But there is one standalone book that really stood out because since I've become a children's author, people ask me this question quite a lot, and I've really kind of gone back and had to think, what did you love when you were that age? Because I'm not really a rereader. I'm not one of those people who goes back and reads books again and again. So the series are also the ones I suppose that you remember because there's so many books in the series that it really kind of stays in your head. But this standalone book that I'm thinking of is called Mrs. Frisbee and the Rats of Nim, by Robert C. O'Brien. And it's an old book published in the 70s. I won't go into too much about what it's about, but I reread it a few years ago to see if it kind of stood up to being as good as it was in my memory. And it really was excellent. And that was a favorite of mine when I was probably 8, 9, 10-ish. So that's the one I'm going to say today. If you haven't heard of it, you should definitely read it. Mrs. Frisby and the Rats of Nim.
I'm making a note now where we can. But in fact, whilst I'm on my notes, I'm going to tell you about my monster and my.
Oh, please
So
do.
my character was my hero was number 13. And he was very he's very organised. Wears glasses. Has a book that provides answers to any question. Methodical and very clever. his
I
his
love that.
his animal companion would be a mouse, very small and very dexterous. So anyway, that's
Fantastic. That's a great animal companion as well because it can be with you at all times, kind of hide in a pocket or sit on your shoulder. I have to ask you, Ben, is that character 13? Is that based on you?
no, not at all, not at all.
I was thinking the glasses and the book. I thought,
I
that's
only use
you.
it. I only use this for reading, but no, absolutely. And I'm not methodical, and I'm certainly not very clever. But yeah.
I love your character. That's an excellent character. Thank you for sharing because the difficulty with the webinar format is obviously you can't kind of interact with the classes
Sure.
and hearing their ideas is my favorite part of the session.
I
So
can't even imagine. So, but you are going to come in September, and we are going to go to a few schools then. So we'll be able to experience all the monsters and the
there are terrifying monsters come to life in that room. It's always that's my absolute favorite is the monster part of the session.
Listen, I'm watching the time tick round to our 50-minute time slot, so I think it's probably a good time to stop. But there's a few questions we've missed off, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Thank you so much, Aisling. Congratulations on your third book. And can I just ask one question? What's next? Have you got a new series, a new thing in mind, a new?
Yes, I do. I haven't sold it yet, so it's not definitely happening, but I am writing another middle grade series, or what I hope will be my next middle grade series, which features gods and dragons, but I will say nothing more.
Nice. Well, it's always a winner. That's two winning products, isn't it? Gods and Dragons. You can't go wrong with those. So,
We'll see what happens with it. It's early days.
brilliant. Well, good luck, and I really look forward to meeting you in September when you're over. Can I just say that we've got Sophie Henn and AF Stedman coming up in a few weeks' time. So those of you watching this or watching it on YouTube, check out our website, ourbookshop.tring.co.uk. One last time, Aisling, thank you so much for joining, and thank you to the audience who joined us as well.
Yes,
And
thank
we'll see you again very soon.
Thank you so much, and thank you everyone for joining. I've had a wonderful time, and thank you, Ben, for hosting.
Brilliant. Cheers, Ed.